Good morning, DawgNation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. What a fun show it's going to be. Before we're done today, Jake Fromm, and, a lot of you are kind of aware of this if you're a very close observer to our show. We typically pre-record with Jake the day before he airs just because Jake's had a very busy schedule, typically speaking. Today, though, Jake's going to join us live, so a little extra fun there on that, I believe. Mike Griffith stops by today there as well. That's really good. We got some new information yesterday about the Georgia schedule that I think sets us up for a fun conversation. But the most important thing of all here today is the fact that Georgia has, for another day, landed a major commitment. And for reasons we're about to get into, this may be the biggest one yet in terms of the conversation that starts for us, not just about Georgia's 2025 class, but the overall direction of the program, even beyond just this particular recruiting cycle. So it's a major, major story here, and we are all over it. So what do you say we get ready to get it started? It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. And it begins right now. Okay. A little bit of an audio thing there, so what do you say we just move past that and say good morning to you and welcome into DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management. We have got a lot we are going to talk about here today. A couple of great guests on their way in just a moment. But to begin, another day, another commitment for the Georgia Bulldogs, and this one is a very big deal as the four-star wide receiver Talyn Taylor has announced his pledge to UGA. I'll show you this on the screen. We've had a little bit of a technical difficulty. I don't know if we can get this or not. I'll show you this on the screen. Taylor making his pledge here to Georgia, putting that out last night. One of those deals where if it's after 9 o'clock and, some of us are kind of starting to shut down and slow down a little bit at that point in time. But Taylor does put it out there. The nice edit coming the way of Hayes Fawcett there at On 3. A good look at him. A nice shot of Sanford Stadium there in the background. And Georgia adds itself a major wide receiver commit into this 2020 class. I should say into this 2025 class, more in the 2020 class here in a moment. And we've watched Georgia add some big ones as of late. Zayden Walker came in last week. Christian Garrett, four-star defensive lineman. We have seen Georgia adding names and doing, some big things here. But in a lot of ways, the addition of Taylor here today might represent, I would say, the biggest recruiting story that we've talked about here over the course of the last few days, last couple of weeks, perhaps the biggest 2025 commit for Georgia overall thus far for a couple of reasons I want to get into. First of all, if Georgia is able to hold on to this Taylor pledge and turn this into a signing come December, you're talking about for the first time since 2020 that Georgia would have brought in a receiver ranked among the top 100 recruits in the country. That's where Taylor is right now. Most of the major services kind of have him ranked inside the top 100. You got to go back to the class of 2020 to see the last time Georgia did that. Jermaine Burton, Arian Smith both have the distinction for that particular year. And by the way, 2020 was also a little bit of an outlier for, previous years prior to that, even predating Kirby Smart, in that, Georgia in that particular cycle was sort of thought to kind of emphatically answer what had been a big question around the Dogs, which is, could this program recruit major wide receiver talents? And that year, it was Smith and it was Burton. It was also Marcus Rosemy-Jack saying, all ranked in kind of the top 10 at their position in the country, that gave Georgia an answer to that question. But even after that cycle, and even after, by the way, the success that Georgia's enjoyed offensively, averaging about 40 points per game in 2021 and in 2022, and then again last season, those questions about the wide receiver position, they have persisted. That's why, even with all the success that Georgia's recently enjoyed, the win for a guy like Taylor perhaps raises some eyebrows just a little bit more. A couple of other notes here on this. As Georgia has continued to add these prospects and these commits day after day after day, we've also seen the recruiting rankings for Georgia go up here for this 2025 class. 24/7 now has them at number 4. On 3 now has the number 3 in their kind of composite rankings here. So Georgia is starting to move up. Georgia is starting to climb exactly as you would expect that Georgia would when it comes to this cycle and this sort of typical recruiting hot streak that we see Georgia kind of go into and get in on around this time of year. Now, to learn a little bit more about Taylor, I think you should read the story that Jeff Sintel put up at DawgNation.com. One of the things that Jeff is reporting in that story is that much like we've seen, guys as of late committing to Georgia and then shutting down their recruitment after that, Jeff is reporting that, planned official visits that Taylor was going to take to Notre Dame and Taylor was going to take to Ohio State. He is, after all, a Midwest guy. Those official visits now will apparently not take place, and Taylor will instead be Georgia's guy. And as far as more of kind of why he chose Georgia and what this is all about, as I said before, we've had a little bit of an issue. Do we have the Talyn Taylor clip? Can we play him with a website here kind of talking about a few weeks ago what it was about Georgia that he liked? Do we have that from Taylor that we can play?
Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about you with Georgia. What appeals to you about Georgia?
Man, they're chasing greatness, man. The way they play SEC ball, they're just different, man. They're dogs down there. I was watching their spring practice. They just do things different, you know what I'm saying? So,
two things I like about that. It's a short clip that's from a website called Buckeye Huddle. They had an interview with him after a camp appearance, and that was what he said about Georgia. I thought it was interesting enough to play here in our show. There are a couple of things that I like. First of all, the kind of catchphrase of chasing greatness. Hey, what stands out to you about Georgia? This is a program that's chasing greatness. I think that's a really cool phrase to use. There's certain things like that just sort of stand out to me, turns of phrases. That's a pretty cool one to hear a recruit use as it relates to Georgia, his interest in UGA because of the pursuit of excellence that kind of sort of would be used to describe this program. And the other thing that stands out here, and that's only a small number of words, it's a relatively short clip, but did you notice what he said he saw that really kind of conjured up a lot of extra interest from him in Georgia? It was watching them practice. Now think about this for a moment. We just saw a photo the other day of Texas and a big official visit weekend, and there was this like string of whether it was Lamborghinis or Ferraris. I don't even know fancy cars all that well. But it was like this string of, I believe it was Lamborghinis. They're all lined up for the recruits to, I guess, enjoy and ride around in or, post photos of. I'm not really even sure what the purpose of them even was. But, we're in a day and age in which recruiting now legally is glitzier, is that a word? More glamorous than it's ever been before. And yet if you take Taylor at his word here, it wasn't the kind of fringe benefits that got him interested in Georgia. It was the way in which they pursued greatness during practice. Now, if you watch Georgia practice and that makes you want to go to Georgia more, then Georgia's probably the place you should probably go. Because I can promise you this, there are plenty of recruits who watch Georgia practice and privately they may be thinking, is this what I want to do for the next 3 to 4 years? Because this looks pretty hard. So if a guy like Taylor in the clip you just heard said, hey, I'm considering all these schools, and this is well before he made his Georgia pledge. But if he's looking around, if he's seeing all those things, and if he says, hey, after watching Georgia practice, that makes me want to go there more because of the way in which they're pursuing greatness on a daily basis, then not only is this the sort of elite, highly ranked recruit that Georgia really needs, but it may be the sort of playing fit and personality that you really want there at UGA. So that's from a different website. It's called Buckeye Huddle, but I thought it was really interesting, and I thought it was worth playing here. Of Taylor kind of in the midst of speaking about some other schools and some other interests that he had, talking about why it is that he likes Georgia. Now, as far as some of the evaluation stuff that's out there, there's a longtime national recruiting reporter named Tom Lemming. I also saw this from him as it relates to a scouting report, and I think this is pretty interesting. He says it's a big catch for Georgia to land Talyn Taylor out of Geneva High School. He's an exceptional athlete, acrobatic skills, long ball threat with big-time separation speed and sure hands. He's got the ability to make, listen to this now, an instant impact on the nation's most talented team. So we have seen Georgia dominate all other position groups. I mean, there's almost no position group that Georgia hasn't cleaned house on when it comes to recruiting. But we have not always seen Georgia bring in the sort of guy, to use the Lemming phrases there, a guy who's good enough to make an instant impact. He is polished enough to play right away. He's got the ball skills, but it's also the ability to run away from people. I mean, let's just be honest here for a moment. How nice would it have been, and obviously Georgia was banged up and injured, so, that was a factor. But how nice would it have been in the SEC championship game this past year to see somebody create some separation against a very good Alabama secondary, to create some green grass between himself and the closest defender and make it an easier throw, and perhaps create an easier opportunity for more points. We've said before, one of the big reasons that Georgia lost that game against Alabama, they just didn't score enough points. They had been scoring the sort of 40-plus points with regularity, but not against the Crimson Tide. A big-time receiver target might have made that game a little bit easier, and that's apparently what Talyn Taylor brings to the table here. So there is a lot to celebrate and a lot to like about what Georgia is getting by adding Taylor into the mold. And the other thing about this that I think is really fun is that it's not just Georgia kind of conquering some new territory, winning with the receiver who's also the top 100 recruit in a way that it really hasn't done in a good number of years. It's also Kirby Smart apparently making good on a promise that he put forth back, a few months ago on National Signing Day when you concluded the 2024 recruiting cycle, that Georgia had real aspirations to make high school football recruiting the main mechanism for how it got talent at that position, the same way it's been committed to at other positions too. We know they've had great success with transfers, but Kirby Smart told us a few months ago they still wanted to have a strong focus on the high school ranks when it comes to this position. And by the way, what Smart promised back then, he has proven to be a man of his word here just a few months later. Let's go back and hear Kirby Smart on that as a reference.
You know, you build your whiteout room through high school. We feel like we should build every room through our high school, but over the last, I guess, 2 to 3 years, we've gone into the portal and been able to get some experienced wideouts. I think that's critical. I do think you can play early in college football at wideout. I think people have proven that. George proved it. AD proved it. Jermaine proved it. They all proved it. You can go out. Dylan Bell proved it. You can go out and play as a freshman, but it's nice to get some SEC experience in the 2 guys we got last year. We need more depth at receiver. It's a position that we're thin at, and that we've got to have enough people to surround Carson with to create weapons.
The point here is it's not just empty rhetoric for Kirby Smart. What he said there they want to do, they are in the midst of doing here right now. Taylor is an example of that. We believe there could be more in-state guys that join up here as well. Certainly Travis Smith, perhaps C.J. Wiley. A lot of fun for Georgia at this position. So kind of finish all of this conversation up, let me just simply say this. Yesterday on the show, we talked about a different Georgia commit. We talked about Todd Robinson out of Valdosta announcing his pledge to Georgia. We gave Josh Crawford a lot of credit for that. Crawford coaches running backs at UGA. Even if Robinson ends up not playing the running back position, it was Crawford's ties geographically to Valdosta that seemed to play a role in that Georgia commit. It's a new Georgia coaching hire that's already paying dividends. Crawford was a new name to a lot of us when he was hired by UGA, but a guy who came in around the same time as Crawford is not a new name at all. It's James Coley, the Georgia wide receivers coach. And some of the same stuff we said about Crawford there, I think you've got to say about Coley there as well, that he is giving Georgia a chance to have more success recruiting high school wide receivers than we've seen Georgia have in quite some time. And I think it is very fair to have an opinion about Coley that's not all that favorable based on his time as offensive coordinator here in 2019. Just being honest, I don't know that Coley did the best job for that team in that particular season. However, he is incredibly competent for this job, the one that he has right now. This is an A-plus black belt level recruiter, and he has proven that in his previous tenure at UGA and other jobs that he's had, and I believe he's proving it for Georgia here right now there as well. When Georgia brought James Coley in as wide receivers coach, it brought a man capable of bringing elite talent into this position. We're already seeing the fruits of that, and the Dogs might be far from done at that position here in this 2025 class. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. We're glad to have you with us. No matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all those video platforms, radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 Ref, podcast, wherever you find them. And by the way, huge thanks to the folks. The podcast platform, the platform we started on, and after all these years, most days it's still the biggest platform that we have. And so for our loyal podcast people on the Apple platform and the Spotify platform, We just really, really appreciate you being there. Those are the two kind of main podcast platforms. There are others, but those are kind of the two main ones. And if you've never subscribed to our show on podcast, we'd love to have you do that. Maybe you watch a little bit on video. You want to go back and kind of hear what you missed. I think the on-demand way to catch up on the show that's perhaps the most convenient is right there on one of those podcast platforms. Also, the podcast shows up in audio form on DawgNation.com each and every day. Our friend Kaylee Manziel helps us do that. So however you choose to listen, just thanks so much for doing that. And by the way, big thanks to our friends at Breda Pest Management for making it all possible. I love Matt Breda. I love Breda Pest Management because I love their devotion to UGA. We talk to you all the time about them being the official pest control provider of UGA Athletics, and I've been listening to a lot of Georgia baseball games, and you'll hear Breda Pest Management mentioned as a part of that. They're supporters of the Georgia baseball team. They're supporters of all UGA Athletics. And for me, if I've got a choice to do business with a person I feel like I can know, and Matt and his team, you can know them. And if I feel like our interests are shared and we have some commonalities, I just think that makes the business experience more enjoyable. They provide a great service, and yet the service is provided by people who kind of see the world in a similar fashion to we do, and I just appreciate that. So as a Georgia fan, if I've got a company that's going to be supporting UGA in a really strong way, I'm going to give them every shot I can to win my business. And if you give Breda Pest Management that shot, I promise you, they're going to come through for you because they've been in business since 1975. They got 125 different employees. And the track record of success that they have not only gets them recognized as the official pest control provider of UGA Athletics, but it also gives you a chance to kind of make the switch and put more money back in your pocket with Breda Pest Management just for making that decision. Because, I've talked to Matt about this. He understands that this is a time in which people got to try to do everything they can to find some way to save money somehow. And obviously, if you've got a termite company that's sending that letter in the mail where the cost of service is going up each and every year, even maybe as the quality of that service with the fly-by-night company you're working with is going down, all the more reason for you to make the switch to Breda Pest Management today, the official pest control provider of UGA Athletics. So please find them online. BredaPest.com. Let me do that one more time. It's BredaPest.com. BREDA, BredaPest.com. Breda Pest Management is the official pest control provider of UGA Athletics, and we're so happy to have them bringing Around the Doghouse to us here today. We've got a couple of great guests coming up on our show. It's Jake Fromm a little bit later on. We'll do a Kroger Fresh Take with him, and we'll talk about everything happening around UGA, including the windfall of wide receiver success the Dogs could be in the midst of enjoying. We'll also catch up with Mike Griffith here coming up in a moment, too. One of the things we'll talk to Mike about is what I also want to talk to all of you about here right now as we go around the doghouse, presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. We got more details yesterday about the Georgia schedule for 2024. Now, this is one of those things that the SEC tried to make this into an announcement. I don't 100% understand this because there wasn't like there was really all that much to announce. We still don't know all the game times, for instance, for Georgia, but we do have what they're calling, I guess, windows now. Let me show you this on the screen. I'm not anti this. I thought it was kind of a fun thing, but this is kind of where we are on this for right now. So we now know Georgia Clemson's a noon kick to begin the season. Tennessee Tech, that's 2 p.m. That's the home opener. Night game at Kentucky, night game at Bama. We have what they're calling a flex for the Auburn game. That's homecoming. Auburn now ranking among the Sisters of the Poor. That's a homecoming game for Georgia, which means it's going to be the sort of late afternoon, 3:30, 4:30 type deal, or the kind of evening, 6:30, 7:30 type deal. That is an evening or afternoon game for Georgia Auburn. Same deal for Mississippi State. That's another home game. Night game, and I do believe we have night game now for Georgia Texas. 3:30 for Georgia and Florida. And then we've also got the kind of flex for the situation for the road game at Ole Miss. We know it'll at least be afternoon, could be night. Once again, the same deal for Tennessee. In the afternoon, could be at night. And then the only sort of 12-ish o'clock start that Georgia's going to have at home here this year is UMass on November 23rd. And, of course, you got Tech coming in Black Friday. So here's the point on all of this as far as I'm concerned. When you rattle through all of that, only one home game for Georgia this year starting the 12 p.m. hour. Obviously, the Clemson game in Atlanta, not the favored game time, but you only got two games on the schedule. They're going to start in that 12 p.m. hour. When you also kind of have it sort of reinforced for exactly who it is that Georgia's playing, I don't know how you couldn't be excited about this schedule. I just don't. And I don't know how you couldn't be excited about what it's going to lead to in terms of a 12-team playoff and all the new discussion we're going to be having. Y'all, trust me, I got a catalog in my mind of all the things about college football and college sports right now that I think might be wrong and changes that might be about to occur that could be changes for the worse. At least for now, this is not one of them. This is fun, and it's challenging. And Kirby Smart said that. This is a challenging schedule, tough road games, and I get all of that. But with challenge comes entertainment factor. And for a lot of y'all are just like me. This is my main source of entertainment. College football is just what I do. I love it. I always will love it as long as it exists. I just feel like I'll probably be, obsessed with this sport. I don't think I've ever seen Georgia on paper having a 12-game slate that looks like what this looks like. I mean, it's really, really fun. I mean, even games we don't spend a lot of time talking about. Against Brock Vandegrift, Kentucky, early in the season. At night, Kroger Field's probably going to be rocking. I don't think we've paid enough attention to the Tennessee game yet for Georgia. That's a day in which Sanford Stadium will be rocking. I mean, how big could Georgia Ole Miss be? Florida has aspirations towards being a little bit of a surprise team, albeit against a very tough schedule. You can't discount what's going to happen there in Jacksonville. And that's like the 7th or 8th biggest game, or, 6th biggest game, something like that. I mean, there is just so much to talk about as it relates to the schedule. And all of this leads to a college football playoff that's also just gigantic this year because of how interesting it is going to be with the extra rounds and the need to beat more quality teams. This is high on the entertainment factor. And, the SEC's announcement of more of those TV windows yesterday gave us a little bit more of a window into all of that. And we'll make that around the doghouse here today, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. So fun stuff with the Georgia schedule and important stuff when it comes to Georgia Farm Bureau. Because, listen, when it comes to an insurance product, we know how important so much of this stuff is. Think about auto insurance. Legally, you're required to have that. You've got to have that for your vehicle. It's also one of those things when you depend on that vehicle to get to work every day, or for many of you, your vehicle sort of is your work. Whether it's like a truck that you're driving around or a vehicle that kind of gets you from sort of sales appointment to sales appointment. That connection you have to your vehicle oftentimes is, one of the main sources of your livelihood. And so when it comes to where you get your auto insurance coverage from, I think one of the things that is if you can connect with a company that's connected to your state and connected to your community, that's probably just a better decision overall on that. Well, that's what Georgia Farm Bureau is all about. They are right here in our state, and they're supporting the local communities in our state, just like the one that you live in, just like the one that I live in. And this is true in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to like the food that's grown in our great state. They're a great supporter of the sort of agricultural history and tradition that we have around here. That is what they're all about. They're a local company that's providing excellent service and understanding just how important their insurance products are for you and the quality of life that you're trying to enjoy. So when you need home insurance or auto insurance or life insurance or anything like that, I want you to keep our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau in mind. I want you to reach out to them and have a conversation with them here today. Give them a call, 877-404-1050. That's 877-404-1050 or online, gfbinsurance.com. One more time, that's gfbinsurance.com. It is great to have Georgia Farm Bureau bringing Around the Doghouse to us here today. All right, so we got a fun show coming up. It's Jake Fromm later on. We also have an update coming up here on a 5-star recruit that Georgia's not going to get, but I do think still matters to Georgia fans. We'll do some of that with you here before we're done there as well. But for now, more on this Georgia schedule and what is a incredible streak for Georgia recruiting. Let's talk about all of that with our buddy Mike Griffith here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Well, let us say hello to Mike Griffith here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management here today. And, Mike, I want to get some of the recruiting stuff with you here in a moment because Georgia's on quite a run here right now. But prior to that, we got, I guess, at least some announcement for the SEC yesterday. It's one of those things that probably didn't quite land with a whole lot of pizzazz, but it's still somewhat interesting to kind of find out a little bit more of the TV windows and the kind of parameters for how a lot of these games are going to be presented on television. But for me, as I told our audience just a moment ago, it reinforces from an entertainment standpoint, a Georgia schedule has never been more interesting than this one appears to be. And if you're a fan and you've not liked the noon starts, the fact that you're kind of now by rule guaranteed to have no more than 2 noon starts at home in a given year, and Georgia's only going to have, I guess, one of those sort of 12 o'clock hour-ish type things at home here this particular year, I think there is a lot to like for fans about this 2024 schedule. Obviously challenging for the coaches and players in the field. We get that. For those of us who get our kicks by watching these games, whether in person or on TV, man, the entertainment factor doesn't get much higher than this.
Yeah, no doubt, Brandon. We knew when we saw the schedule that the Dogs would have their work cut out for them, and a couple of these games on the road, obviously, that's what makes it tough. But the kick times, to your point, this is a new way of doing scheduling that the SEC's come about. You still have an opportunity for more night games. You still have Auburn, Mississippi State, Texas, and Ole Miss and Tennessee are all flex games, which means they could be afternoon or evening. But to your point, we know that there's a couple of, I guess UMass is actually a 12:45 game in the noon hour. But that and Clemson are the 2 early games. Tennessee Tech, 2 p.m. I know, again, a lot of people like the night games. The day games have their place as well, I suppose. I think it's setting up well for the Dogs. We already know Kentucky and Alabama will be under the lights a week off between those 2 games. So it's exciting, Brandon, because it's coming up. It'll be here before you know it. Kirby's got a lot of momentum going. I saw him at the baseball game. I actually stepped into the elevator, and there was Kirby Smart pressed against the wall so that the fans at ground level wouldn't see him when the door opened. He probably would have got mobbed, but looked good. He's in good spirits, and obviously there's a lot of reason for optimism this year.
The other thing that I kind of mentioned about the schedule a moment ago is because a game like Alabama, Kalen DeBoer's SEC debut, and just kind of continuation, what's been a very important series for Georgia, whether Nick Saban's there or not, because it gets so much attention, because Texas gets so much attention, that other games end up not getting nearly as much attention. And when you see it kind of all laid out and you start kind of thinking about, okay, what time is the Georgia-Ole Miss game going to be? Or what time is the Georgia-Tennessee game going to be? Auburn, Mississippi State, games like that. What you realize is even kind of down the slate a bit, Georgia-Tennessee has ranked as a very big game the last 2 years, especially in 2022, but even to a certain extent 2023. We had a great time on our DawgNation Invasion there. That's a game that probably has not gotten enough attention. What Hugh Freeze is trying to do, bounce back year 2, that probably has not gotten enough attention. That there's so much energy being expended right now talking about season kick against Clemson, a renewal against Alabama, inaugural game for Georgia against Texas as SEC foes. Boy, the rest of that schedule still leaves you plenty to talk about as well.
Oh, no doubt. And it's going to be a journey. And, and it's, why Kirby's going to take them one game at a time. I mean, you just, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. You can't win them all in the opening week. The Clemson game absolutely has to be the focus for Georgia, that noon game in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Such a classic game there just a few years ago in Charlotte with Clemson. That Dabo Swinney's team they've won 5 games in a row. I don't think that their talent is where it was. I don't think their coaching is where it was. And yet this is still, I don't think, a very easy game. I mean, it's not like you're playing UMass or Tennessee Tech or even a bottom rung SEC team. I mean, Clemson to me is dangerous in the opener just because of the factors. There's just, you don't know what you don't know. Georgia, though, I just feel like is so stacked right now. I think there's so much momentum. I think Kirby has done a great job managing Carson Beck. It looks like he's really pushed Carson to become a better leader, to become more assertive. Kirby will not allow that narrative to rest. He's going to call him out for it every chance he gets to make sure that Carson takes care of business. This is going to be Carson Beck's legacy. And we know that he's probably one of the top 1 or 2 quarterbacks in the country in the NFL draft. We know he's a Heisman Trophy co-favorite. And yet he's got to get on the same page as all these new receivers. And that's going to be determined right now. When these guys are doing their individual workouts and Carson's calling these guys together. We've heard Jake Fromm in the past talk about the importance of that. I know you got Jake coming up on the show, yeah. But that really is, what makes the difference is what happens in the offseason.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. We did actually talk about that with Jake a little bit last week too, because the one thing that Jake has kind of said before is that is obviously an expectation for quarterback, and it probably does get easier after you've kind of been on the job for a year. And the one point that Jake makes, and this is the sort of thing that you can only say if you've been the person trying to do this. I think there's a certain kind of lived experience that I think shapes his point of view on this, is you've also got to try to find a way to do that within the parameters of your own personality, that you can't be something that you're not. And even in the category of like very successful quarterbacks, both at the NFL level or the college level or whatever else, there are still different personality types within those quarterbacking categories, even in the sort of the elite of the elite. Not everybody's sort of made the same way. So I think an interesting point that Jake has made about that as it relates to whether it be Carson or Stetson before him or anybody else is, yes, there is a certain expectation of leadership, and yet there's also a need to kind of do that from an authentic and natural place, because if it's something that comes from a phony place or a fake it till you make it type mentality, then these very, very tough-minded football players that are around you, they're going to see right through that.
Yeah, and really, I thought, covering Jake, I thought he did that as well as any quarterback I've ever been around. I mean, I can't say enough for the way Jake Fromm handled himself in 2018 and had to be one of the most difficult quarterback situations in recent history. His leadership, his poise, his consistency. And, I think we've seen that from Carson on the field with his disposition, but I don't think that Carson has maximized his ability to make the players around him better. And I think that's what's next. That's what this year comes down to. We know Carson is special. Like I said, solves Rubik's Cube in under a minute, reads the defense in 5 seconds. But can he make his talents translate to that sort of charisma that Jake did? I mean, Jake worked with George Pickens. Think about the relationship Jake had with Pickens by the end of the year. Think about the relationship that Jake had with his teammates. Even as a freshman, he allowed the stars to be stars. Well, now Carson's the man. He's got to be more in command, and he's got to have these players around him play better for him and with him. And I think that's coming. I know they all like him. But at times, that quarterback has to be assertive, and I think that's what's next. And I had a thought, Brandon. I wanted to share this with you. I was talking with a former SEC defensive coordinator, a guy by the name of John Chavis. You may remember he was there with Tennessee in the 90s and A&M. And yeah, Chief. I was talking with Chief last week, and we were talking about quarterbacks, and he was talking about, obviously, it's the most important position on the team. And he said the most dangerous thing for a defensive coordinator is a quarterback that can manage the game. And sometimes I think I've been guilty of it where, you hear the term game manager and you go, oh, well, that doesn't mean, actually the game manager is the biggest compliment that you can make, because the game manager doesn't have delay of games, always picks up the blitz, makes sure he moves people around. Carson is such a unique blend with his unbelievable arm and his talents, but he is also a very good game manager. And all the Georgia quarterbacks really have been pretty good at this. Kirby insists on it, right? You're not going to get false starts at Georgia. You're not going to have blitzes that don't get picked up. I mean, these quarterbacks at Georgia, you really have to check all the boxes. And I just feel like Carson is poised for a really big season. And I think the key and what Kirby knows, and this is why Kirby always says it in the media, because he's putting pressure on Carson, is he's got to try and push himself a little bit more verbally to assert himself with these guys. Carson has a way of asking guys to do things. I think he needs to have the command to do things. And again, I use Jake as an example because I thought Jake did an incredible job, particularly in 2019. And I know we've got a story up on James Coley. When all those receivers were out, it was a revolving door. He didn't know who he was throwing to from week to week too. There were times receivers were breaking the wrong way. Jake never threw anybody under the bus. He always stayed poised, and he always led. And again, Jake is a guy I have a lot of respect for. So I always watch his segment on your show as well, Brandon, so you know.
Well, that's nice to hear, Mike. I really appreciate that. I want to shift gears here in the time we have left to what Georgia's been doing in recruiting as of late. And on the one hand, well, this is what you expect Georgia to do. They essentially did this last year as well, in July as opposed to June, but knocking off big commits sort of day after day after day to kind of climb the recruiting rankings. Georgia's just doing all of that over again. But I think it's important to note is that Georgia's business as usual is occurring at a time in which a lot of other things around college football are really, really changing. A stat that I've given here a little bit. Last year, if you look at the top 13 recruits in America, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Player Rating, they signed with 10 different schools. The top 19 players signed with 15 different schools. In other words, The prevalence of NIL has seemingly created a level of parity around where some of the top players are choosing to go. It's not as easy as it used to be to hoard all the great players the way that Georgia sort of did for a little while there under Kirby Smart. And yet, if you're a Georgia fan, I think what you take a lot of comfort out of right now is that as a lot of change is occurring in the sport, Georgia, in a lot of ways, is choosing not to be a participant in that change. And for the Dogs, that is a very good thing.
Well, I think that, the transfer rules are a game changer, right? It's free agency, essentially. When you're able to go out and get a guy like Trevor Etienne in the portal, which I just can't wait to watch him play. But to your point, you get the number 10 player in the country, a 5-star there out of Sly County. And, what Kirby's been able to do with the momentum that he has, and he is on schedule. This is not like, oh, wow, all of a sudden these guys are coming. Saying, no. This is exactly how they have it scheduled. These are the things falling into place. These are the players that Georgia's targeted. I like that their top 2 rated players are both in-state kids, elite in-state kids. I think that matters. I think it makes it a little bit easier to manage. But no, Georgia's talent acquisition is incredible. And to me, one of the things that separates Kirby Smart, I don't think he gets nearly enough credit for his X's and O's and his philosophical approach to the game, but roster management, no doubt, is where Georgia is elite. Kirby's ability to use the portal when he needs to, or not use the portal when he didn't need to. You remember just a couple of years ago, the only guy that Georgia really tried to get after the first national title was Caleb Williams, and now you see why they tried to get Caleb Williams. But fact is, Kirby's not going to waste his time frivolously chasing talent that he doesn't need. It's got to be a blend of players developed in the program. That's still the goal, to make that your primary source of building a roster is from within. And yet we know that because of injuries, because of transfers, because of kids that, have the opportunity to go play immediately somewhere else and get a bag of money rather than be a backup, some may employ that strategy. Others may say, you know what, I want to practice against the best in the country every day under the best coaches and have a chance to win a national title. Everybody's a little different. I do think that Kirby's ability to judge these players and have a better idea of, okay, who's in it for the long term, who understands the process, that's gotten better. The worst thing you have is when a guy leaves after 1 year before you really give him a shot or give the program a shot to develop him. So the roster management's incredible. It's happening right now with these elite athletes. Again, you get that linebacker, that top 10 linebacker, you just shake your head at Glenn Schumann and he just keeps knocking him out. You shake your head at James Coley, what a tremendous recruiter he is, what a difference maker he is. Right now, I can't imagine Georgia outside of that schedule, Brandon, outside of that schedule, I can't imagine Georgia being in a better position to win another national title.
And I'll squeeze this in real quick. Got about a minute left here. It's not lost on me, and it's certainly not lost on Georgia fans, that the latest commit, Talyn Taylor, is a receiver ranked inside the top 100 for recruits overall. That is not the kind of player we have typically seen Georgia win with, even predating Kirby Smart, not always winning with the high-level receivers. So if Georgia's now also about to do this, in addition to the dominance it shows in other positions, that could be a lot of real trouble for the rest of college football.
Yeah, and let's give Mike Bobo credit. I mean, you don't hear that often, but yeah, I mean, they're coming to play for Mike Bobo. I mean, there's a thought, oh, well, Todd Monken's off to the NFL, and now what? Well, now what? You're getting a top 100 receiver. Now what? You're getting Carson Beck as a co-favorite for the Heisman Trophy after 1 year under Mike Bobo. I don't think people talk enough about Mike Bobo and the difference he makes in recruiting. Mike is a very authentic guy, very popular with players, and he directs the offense. So yes, while James Coley is an incredible recruiter, has experience as an offensive coordinator at Georgia, clearly has a tremendous amount of respect and relationship with Kirby Smart. I think you also got to give Mike Bobo credit. Again, fans seem a little reluctant to do that. And again, I understand there's, whatever history, but this guy is really good. And what he did last year was very impressive. Brandon, the game plan didn't beat Georgia against Alabama. Georgia beat themselves against Alabama with the injuries and the turnovers and the underthrown pass to Arian Smith. It was not Mike Bobo. So I think Mike Bobo has come in and made a big difference. I think there's a lot of street cred with the Georgia offense. Aaron Murray told us he was going to throw the expletive out of the ball, and Bobo has certainly lived up to that promise. And I think we're going to see Carson firing from the hip this year. What Kirby say? You got to let the cat loose. So I think we're going to see a lot more explosive offense next year, and that's going to get even more great receivers and quarterbacks in here.
Mike, thanks so much for your time here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management here today. We'll certainly be reading plenty from you there at DawgNation.com, and we'll look forward to having you back on the program again very soon as well.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so interesting conversation there with Mike, and of course not the only big-time guest we have coming up for you today. As Mike alluded to, the former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm will join us about 5 minutes from right now there as well. Prior to that, though, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And man, oh man, and I'm not being funny, I'm being serious. We had quite a conversation here this morning, behind the scenes and off the record, but we are getting very, very close to making a gigantic announcement. And one of those things that, like, listen, we have great, folks here in the building, of course, but sometimes when it comes to a corporation, things move a little slower sometimes. And so you get a lot of T's that got to be crossed, a lot of I's that got to be dotted. Well, all of that has fallen into place, and a green light is almost getting ready to be given for what I believe is going to be the biggest announcement we've ever made as it relates to DawgNation and Royal Caribbean. So I'll just give you that little bit of a hint. This is going to be gigantic, and I cannot wait to tell you about it. We will be doing that very, very soon. And by the way, speaking of that, let's slide right into Cruise Around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean, and obviously a chance to debut for me very soon here on the brand new Royal Caribbean cruise ship known as Utopia of the Seas. So much fun stuff to be had on this, including some brand new bar and restaurant concepts, unlike anything else. And that's what Royal Caribbean does. When they have one of these new ships, they introduce some new things that if you've been on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship before, you'll say, oh, I recognize this. I've enjoyed this before. But in other instances, you'll say, oh, this is unlike anything I've ever experienced before, because they want to really make sure everybody's having a great time on board. Many of you have experienced it for yourself, you know all about it, but perhaps this is your first time. And so if it is, I would invite you to have that conversation with Jessica Slater. Ask her about Utopia of the Seas. Hey, why is there so much buzz and energy about this? What are people so excited about when it comes to whether it be the Mason Jar, the Southern-themed restaurant that's got the bourbon cocktails and the live music country band that kind of plays? What is it going on here on this Utopia of the Seas? Jessica can tell you all about that. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. All right. A couple of stories here for us just for a moment. I thought it was interesting. CBS Sports ranks top wide receivers in college football by wide receiver groups, And on a day and age in which we're talking about Georgia and recruiting wide receivers, when it comes to Georgia on the field here right now, we're seeing Georgia mentioned in this category. The top receiver group in the country, according to CBS Sports, the upcoming year is Oregon. Behind them, Ohio State. Perhaps no surprise there as it relates to the Buckeyes. You've got Texas. That's something to be mindful of when Georgia goes there in October. You've got Missouri. That's mostly led by Luther Burden. You've got Ole Miss there coming in number 5. But then right after that, what you call the kind of the honorable mention category, you do see Georgia mentioned, along with, the LSU, Miami teams like that. But Georgia right there with its transfer receivers, Colby Young, Dominic Lovett, Ra Thomas, being kind of thought to be some of the guys helping lead the way for kind of a resurgence for Georgia at the wide receiver position. So I think if you're a UGA fan, there's a lot to like right now about Georgia at wide receiver because of the quarterback delivering the ball, because of the offensive system that Mike Bobo employs, and because of the talent that seems to also be stacking up at this position in future years. This has kind of been viewed at times to be kind of a final frontier for Georgia, but perhaps conquering that frontier, something that Georgia might be about ready to do. And how about the fact that of, what I just mentioned, all these teams in the SEC with these top receivers, teams like Texas and Ole Miss, these are teams that Georgia will play here for the upcoming season. Keep that in mind. All right. Let's talk about Julian Juju Lewis here for a moment. Not because he's still on Georgia's radar. At this point in time, that's not going to happen. Georgia has made its quarterback choice, and it's Ryan Montgomery, and I think Dog fans are pretty happy about that. But what is next for Juju? Lewis was, this past weekend, back at USC again. It's kind of funny. This recruitment seems to be sort of frozen exactly where it was when it seemed like Georgia kind of fell out of the mix and kind of made a different choice than Juju for this class. It's either stay at USC, it's perhaps flip to Auburn, and it seems like Colorado is also a factor there as well. Now, to be honest, given how little Colorado truly recruits high school players, I sort of wonder if Deion is really a serious factor here. And this ultimately doesn't come down to Auburn, and we know how bad Hugh Freeze needs his quarterback, and then also USC, and we know how bad Lincoln Riley needs some sort of win right now, because that sort of feels like a star that has fallen just a little bit. So Lewis is not really on the radar for Georgia fans all that much anymore, because he's obviously not coming to UGA. But whether or not he flips to Hugh Freeze and gives Hugh a big win, whether or not he stays in L.A. with Lincoln Riley and giving Riley perhaps a little bit more stability than he appears to have right now, what Lewis ends up doing could, I think, be pretty fascinating here. And obviously after a visit to L.A. this past weekend, that is kind of in the spotlight. I was going to do something on the Army-Navy game. I may save that until tomorrow, and we'll do some more of that here a little bit later on, and instead get ready to do what we love doing this week at this time. That's a Kroger Fresh Take, and bring on Jake Fromm here, the former Georgia quarterback. So we will say hello to Jake Fromm. Jake, it's so glad we are so glad to have you as a part of the show. Your time always so enjoyable for all of us. So thank you so much for being here.
Brennan, always good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So it's a day in which a lot of Georgia fans are celebrating a win for Georgia recruiting. Talyn Taylor is a four-star receiver inside the top 100. This is a pretty big recruiting win for the Dogs, and I guess I'm sort of curious from your perspective. Obviously, Georgia has enjoyed, great success in a lot of ways, and yet breaking through at the receiver position is one of those things that has been maybe a little bit more difficult than some of the other recruiting success that Georgia's enjoyed. We just had a guest a moment ago that says, hey, when these recruits see the way in which, this past year Mike Bobo is putting up about 40 points per game, it makes it a little easier for receivers to make that decision. Is that something that you think as well, that all of a sudden now these receivers see a track record of success for Georgia offensively, and so therefore trusting this to be a place that they can be utilized well? That's a choice that's now easier for them to make. Is that kind of the way that you see this?
I completely see it that way. As a theme on offense over the past couple of years, and really throughout the college football landscape, teams are continuing to throw the ball throughout the full course of the game. Teams aren't getting up by 20 points and saying, hey, let's just kind of run this thing out, maybe a few RPOs here and there, and let's just get to the next one. No, they're wanting to put up points, and they're trying to be exciting, and they're trying to get other guys out on the field. Quite frankly, just to make everybody happy, everybody get a little bit of a playing time. And I think that factors in a little bit to what these high school guys are seeing from Georgia. They see Carson going out, throwing for all these yards, throwing for all these touchdowns. And there's no reason for me to believe that they don't think that this trend is going to continue, especially with the guys coming up here in the future as well with Gunner. So, yeah, I see it 100%.
Well, it's one of those things, too, where we know negative recruiting exists, and it doesn't have to be true to work. And so I think a lot of receivers have heard for a while of, I want to go to Georgia because of, whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And yet, you're finally at UGA. You've got a guy like George Pickens who went on to have, when he was healthy, a very productive college career. Now he's one of the stars in the NFL. And I think sometimes Georgia doesn't get credit for that. You look at the guys over the course of a championship season in 21 and 22, they were kind of putting up big numbers. I don't think that Georgia's kind of always gotten credit for that. That actually the overall offensive performance for Georgia is maybe sometimes better than it's sometimes given credit for. And somehow some of these negative recruiters have been able to kind of get away with saying some stuff about UGA that's not always backed up by facts as it is.
No, I agree with that as well. We've been blessed on the offensive side of the ball to have a lot of talented football players. When you have a lot of talented football players, you want to get to the ball, but quite frankly, there's only one football in order to get to all these different guys that have a chance to do something exciting, to make a play. And that's the blessing and the curse that the coaches, Bobo, that they see that on offense, like, hey, how do I get this ball? How do I get this guy involved? And especially early in the game too, to keep everybody really locked in and get a feel and a flow for the game. But like you mentioned, the negative recruiting that definitely comes up and will be used. And man, when you have a really talented group, it's tough. But if you're a recruit and you have that competitive mindset to want to go be the best, there's no better place to go and try to be the best right now.
As it relates to the Taylor commitment, one of the guys that's going to get some of the credit for this is James Coley, who's now back at Georgia as a wide receivers coach after obviously having a previous stint here before. Now, you kind of knew him in your final year as an offensive coordinator. That's a job he only did for 1 year. But we know that as a recruiter, he's had great success for a long time. And so I guess I'm kind of curious from what your experience with him from a personality standpoint was, and how do you think it is that Coley's able to win with recruits? Because no matter what his tenure may have been as offensive coordinator, clearly he is a terrific recruiter. And what do you think about Coach Coley that enables him to do that?
Yeah, man, Coach Coley, he brings the juice. He is relentless all the time. He is cranked up on his Cuban coffee, and he is just on fire, on 110 all the time. So guys feed off that energy. They see it. It's not fake juice. It's real juice. He's real. He's authentic, and he loves the game of football. So I think guys really feed off that, and they want to be a part of just a good environment and a good winning environment. I think he has a lot to do with that.
Well, it's funny you say this, and I'll make this the last question on this particular topic, but we played a little audio clip of Taylor a little earlier, and he talked about kind of becoming more impressed with Georgia after watching the practice. And the point that I made, Jake, is, and you know this firsthand, it's like, if you watch Georgia practice as a player, I'm sure there are plenty of players who are like, I'm not so sure this is what I want to do for the next 3 to 4 years. This seems pretty hard. And so if you see Georgia practice and then that makes you like Georgia more, then Georgia probably is the kind of place you perhaps want to go, because this style of practice isn't for everybody. It certainly wouldn't be for me. I don't believe I can. I certainly don't believe I'd be able to hold up, doing that on a daily basis. You obviously did that. So the kind of players who like it more after they see it, well, that's a pretty good thing for Georgia, because obviously not everybody's going to be that way.
Agree 100%. That is a good sign. And I'm going to go on a quick anecdote and tangent here. I mean, I remember being there, enrolling early my freshman year, and before we start spring ball, Kirby goes over in a team meeting on like how to practice, and it was the first time that I've really ever been open to that idea. Like, what do you mean I'm learning how to practice? You go out there and practice. Well, you're how quick we transition in between drills. He's showing you where the drills are already set up. Hey, this is the drill that we're doing right after stretch, and ball security. And there's so many different things that go into, you're not just learning plays, but you're really learning how to practice. And if you can learn how to practice well, you are really onto something, and you'll be a really successful football team.
Yeah, to sort of back that up, I heard Nolan Smith say one time that when he first got to Georgia after a practice, he went to Nakobe Dean, who had also just gotten to Georgia. These are two guys that would go down in history as some of the best, like all-time greats. Mm-hmm. And Nolan goes to Nakobe, and they're looking at each other like, what have we done? Like what are we doing here? Well, what have we signed up for? These were players who would become the sort of standard bearers, what the practice regimen's all about. And yet when they first started it, even they were questioning their ability to hold up in it and endure it all.
Yeah, this ain't high school football practice. And to be quite frank, if you look at it in totality, especially those college football practices end up being harder than NFL practices. They really do. There's a couple days in camp, where guys really get after it in the NFL, just with the intensity level. But just over the course of the season, nothing is harder than a high intense program in the SEC.
It's a great story. I'm glad you told that. I want to hit another topic with you before we say goodbye to you. Let me remind folks, though, this is our Kroger Fresh Take with Jake Fromm here today on DawgNation Daily. And I also want to remind you that we got some fun stuff coming up. And frankly, it's about time I had a day. And by the way, Jake Fromm gets to enjoy this day this year. It's Father's Day, right? It's like it's our day to be celebrated. It's our day to be taken care of. So all the mamas out there and all the kids out there, be ready to go to your local Kroger, whether it be the gift cards or the stuff to go on the grill, because the cookouts are a big part of the Father's Day celebrations. In all seriousness, whatever you need for a great Father's Day, Kroger's got you covered for that. So stop by in store. You can begin your shopping experience there online. Kroger.com/Father's Day. It is a great weekend. We love Father's Day, and Kroger, we love the way in which they make Father's Day even more fun. So Kroger.com/Father's Day for more on that. And Jake, are you looking forward to your first Father's Day as a father here? How excited are you about that?
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped. Wife set me up with a pretty good gift, and yeah, excited to get with the parents. And we're still trying to figure out logistics on who's coming where. But in my family, there's always some really good food wrapped around Father's Day weekend. So excited about that.
I love it. All right, let me squeeze in one more thing before we let you go. Obviously, it was a heartbreaker for Georgia on Monday night as the Super Regional came to an end. One game shy of the College World Series, but man, what a season and what a start it seems like Wes Johnson's getting off to here. And, I know you don't know this baseball team as well as you knew your own football team, but, I want to draw a parallel here in my mind of when you guys got to Georgia, how quickly things started happening for what became a very successful program. I mean, can you draw that line there as well, that it looks like, Wes Johnson's perhaps potentially building something here at UGA that could eventually sort of look the same way, because he clearly got off to a great start here this season?
Yeah, exactly. I really hope, 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now, we're looking back and like, hey, man, that was it. That was the start. These guys were part of building something really special for years to come. And definitely a heartbreaker. I mean, just what a series, getting absolutely blown out in the first game to blowing them out in the second game to getting a really good game at night. On the big stage. And just there watching it, tough. Just coming up so close. And I know those guys wanted it more than anything, especially playing at home in front of everybody. And, but I think when you look at a big picture, I think we can say, hey, this is a really good start for this coach and this program. And I think there'll be a lot more successful teams and seasons coming up.
So you got to go, you were in Foley Field this weekend?
No, I was not. I was watching it, but I had plenty of buddies going and texting about the atmosphere. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun to kind of hear it through them.
Awesome to hear, Jake. We love your time on the show. We appreciate your thoughts on everything going on at UGA. I know how much you love the sport of baseball, so it's fun to talk to you about that. Hey, have a great week. Enjoy your first Father's Day, and we will look for your first Father's Day as a father, and then we will look forward to talking to you here very soon as a part of a Kroger Fresh Take on DawgNation Daily as well.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. Look forward to it.
All right, great stuff there from Jake Fromm, the former Georgia quarterback. Let me do a couple of notes here with you before we get ready to say goodbye to you. First of all, we've loved the last couple of weeks being able to talk to you about our friends at Georgia Safe Retirement Planners on the program. One of these days, my dream is, Jake talks about being in Foley Field and enjoying the atmosphere. Like, one of these days, I'm just going to, go to all the Georgia games and travel and see him and just sort of kick back and relax and kind of enjoy that. I don't know that I'll ever stop working, but I kind of want to live sort of a retirement life and kind of enjoy some of the things that go along with that. Well, that's what our friends at Georgia Safe Retirement Planners want to help you enjoy, whatever your kind of vision and version of all of that is. They want to give you the comfortable retirement you deserve. So have the conversation with them that sort of sets you up for a free, no-obligation retirement planning service discussion to sort of figure out what's next for you that includes an explanation for how all of this provides really no upfront risk for you. That's where the idea of safe retirement comes in. It's the peace of mind you deserve to know that your financial future can be secure. I want you to find them online at GeorgiaSafeRetirementPlanners.com. That is GeorgiaSafeRetirementPlanners.com. So check them out there on that. Also, let me give you this note here there as well. One of the things we've been talking to you about a lot lately is our DawgNation Invasions coming up and our friends from Atlanta Sports Trips who are helping us plan all of those. But obviously the name would suggest, Atlanta Sports Trips, that there's more going on than just Georgia football here when it comes to our friends at Atlanta Sports Trips. And how about this? This year, the Atlanta Falcons are playing out in Las Vegas against the Raiders. Now, whether you choose to cheer for Brock Bowers when you're out there or the Atlanta Falcons, that's your business. Listen, what you do when you're in Vegas, as the saying goes, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So who you choose to cheer for when you're there, that's totally your business. But in all seriousness, if you want a great experience here. That's what Atlanta Sports Trips is providing for you when it comes to the Falcons traveling out to Las Vegas here this year. They got tickets and hospitality packages right now to see that game, which includes a 3-night stay at the Planet Hollywood Resort and Casino right there on the Vegas Strip. And the entire package includes a welcome party, a VIP Q&A with the former Falcon and the originator of the Dirty Bird dance. Can I still do that? I don't know. Jamal Anderson. All kinds of fun stuff there, and it also can include tickets to the game there as well. So please go to the website, atlsportstrips.com. That's atlsportstrips.com for more on that. And then, if that's not enough, how about a shout out to our friends at the Finish Long Drink? I tell you what, there's nothing. The weather the last couple of days has been just about perfect. There's nothing I'd love more than spend a great day at the pool with a nice, cool, ice-cold cooler filled with the Finish Long Drink. Whether it's the cranberry or the Long Drink Strong, Long Drink Zero, no carbs, no sugar, the traditional, my favorite, that's the blue can. It's the grapefruit flavor. It's the gin kick. It just looks good. You know how like when you have to reach your hand down into the cooler, you have to sort of fish around a little bit to find it. And when you finally touch that cold, is it aluminum? Is that what cans are made out of? You touch the cold aluminum. Easy for me to say aluminum. I think that's how you say that. And you pull it out, and it just sort of the condensation sort of drips down off the can. Man, I love that. So get yourself some Finish Long Drink. Go to thelongdrink.com, and you can find out where you can pick some up today. Speaking of being outside, I love the beach, and I'm very jealous of our Golden Shoe winner for today. Kind enough to send this to me. It's an awesome picture. I'll show you this on the screen here, and I'll explain why it makes me jealous. So Joey Thomas shares this. He says, the kids and I brought a little Athens to the Bahamas last week while on vacation. We got a few go dogs after we were done. Hashtag dogs on top, hashtag sandcastle, hashtag golden shoe. Now, if you're watching on video, you see this. It is a very impressive rendition of Sanford Stadium made like a sandcastle. First of all, that stadium's nicer than the one that Georgia Tech plays in on a regular basis. So that in itself is pretty impressive. But the reason why I'm jealous is because, like, my daughter and I, she's young, we like to make sandcastles together. I've sort of tried to do something like this. I didn't come close to getting something worthy of being photographed, but this really looks like Sanford Stadium. It's very well done. So Joey and his family get a well-deserved golden shoe for that. There in the Bahamas, great to see all of that. What a blast that is. And lousy stinking Gators, they got none of that kind of stuff going on right now. They get toppled like a sandcastle each and every time they take on the Georgia Bulldogs. In fact, that's been true now for the last 1,313 days. We don't see that changing anytime soon. 13, bad luck for some, but we're not worried about that. It's our Gator Hater Updater. We hope all of you have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that. We're going to take some comments, and I will beg your pardon. I can't go crazy long today, but I'll try to make everybody's time, valuable here. So let me go to YouTube first, and we'll see what's on people's mind. I thought Jake, boy, the story on practice from Jake, how great was that? Like, that was really good. See, this is what I like, and I especially, like to have the former players on who can kind of tell you some of that kind of stuff. This is what it feels like to be there. This is what it feels like to be kind of behind the scenes on that. And I think as a player, listen, it's not your job to talk. It's your job to do. You're a player and you do. But when you do have someone like Jake and the guests we're lucky enough to have on, and they're good at talking about the experience of being a player, I think sometimes magical stuff happens with that. So that's great. That's great. Frank Patterson says, who do you think is the bigger UGA legend? Is it Ben Cleveland or is it Tate Ratledge? Or as he calls him, Tate Ratty? I guess Tate's going to have a chance to kind of continue his legacy here right now. In terms of who's like the bigger comic book character, I would say that Ben Cleveland is still a little bit more of a folk hero than Ratledge is. Like Tate kind of has the look, but Ben Cleveland, I mean, the story goes that he killed a squirrel and ate it for breakfast, that he was hungry, went outside, killed a squirrel, and then ate that squirrel for breakfast that morning. I don't know if that's true, but that's the story. So Tate looks like a guy who would do that. Ben Cleveland, according to folklore, actually did do that. Plus, Ben Cleveland, I like wrestling. Like, he looks like a wrestler. Like, I mean, he looks like one of these guys that would be fighting Hulk Hogan on Saturday Night's Main Event. Like he's just this obnoxiously big guy. So, in terms of legendary status, obviously Ratledge has got a big year coming up to add to his legacy. But in terms of the unconfirmed, just sort of crazy, one day I saw so-and-so do this, Ben Cleveland's hard to beat on that, right? A little bit hard to beat out for that. Ryan Walker hitting us up here. Yeah, Ryan, I am going to get back to you. We're going to see if we can make that happen for sure. I'm going to do everything in my power to make that happen for sure, because obviously I have great respect for you and what you do. Paul Moon says, man, Taylor was such a big pickup. Watching his highlights again, he points the ball so well, or high points the ball so well, and just runs past you. Yeah, that's the thing that I noticed, and we had the lemming line on this a little earlier. It's that ability to create separation, because that is really, obviously, there's only a small number of receivers who can truly do that. And how much easier does everybody's job on offense get easier when that's the case? Which is some version of English from me there on that. By the way, we've got all kinds of Facebook migrators today. Ryan Walker, Philip Wells is over here mentioning something about hash browns. I do like hash browns. Frank Patterson also impressed by the sandcastle. Yeah. So my daughter and I, we make sandcastles. I just like the beach. I like doing beach things. I like making sandcastles. I have probably tried to do the sort of Sanford Stadium style sandcastle before. I'm not very artistic. I think I'm creative, but not artistic, if that makes sense. Now, I almost did a different joke. Let me not do that. Lance D, by the way, a big supporter of the Finish Long Drink Zero. I do think that we have made amazing strides in the fermented sugar because that's what alcohol is, right? It's fermented sugar. You can't get around that. If it's not sugar, it's not alcohol. But it seems like, and Long Drink Zero is I think the best example of this that I know. It seems like we're making good strides in the the lowish calorie alcoholic category, which is pretty fascinating technology. And if you ask the average American, would you rather go back to the moon landing? I'm kidding. Would you rather go back to the moon, or would you rather develop, like a 0-calorie alcoholic drink? I think we know which would get the majority of votes from people online. Let's see what else. Paul Moon on the subject of A&M in Florida. First of all, to me, it's so funny how many times Texas A&M and Florida have played since they've been in the SEC, and how few times Georgia and Texas A&M have played. That's a funny thing. There is also a lot of chatter out there around Texas A&M, and it's one of those things where I probably go out of my way not to mention that, just because of how wrong I ended up being, kind of overhyping some of the Jimbo Fisher stuff over the years. But it's hard not to know. Now, we also do this every offseason where eventually it's like everybody sort of finds something that's not being talked about enough. Then they start talking about that incessantly to the point, well, that's also kind of a dead horse now beaten beyond recognition there as well. And so we're kind of doing this too. It's like, obviously Georgia, Texas get their deal. People have a little bit of a downgraded expectation for Alabama because of Nick Saban, perhaps understandably. And so then, go back to put our long sleeves and our winter coats on. It was Ole Miss, Missouri, Ole Miss, Missouri, Ole Miss, Missouri, Ole Miss, Missouri. Well, now that's been done to death to the point you got to find something else to talk about. And it's been sort of the summer of Texas A&M, a little bit of that on Tennessee. We've probably contributed to some of that as it relates to Tennessee. It's just kind of funny. We do this, and by we, all of us who care about college football, we do this every year. Let me go back to DawgNation.com for a moment, because I was a little SEM Dog says Jake Fromm, pure class, one of my all-time favorite dogs. Yeah, a really good guy. By the way, I like DT. Really good play on words with the Sandford Stadium. I should have perhaps come up with that, but a very good job by DT there too. Oh, how about this? Greg Dog letting us know that Jerry West, a guy who's famous for being the logo, the NBA logo is the silhouette of Jerry West, has passed away. In recent years, there was the HBO show that was controversial because it incorrectly, according to people who would have known him from the time, incorrectly portrayed West as something different than what he was. And I guess the show was kind of taking some dramatic and in some cases like comedic liberties with that, which I think was a weird thing for a lot of us who are sports fans because that's not how sports, content is typically portrayed when it's kind of borrowed from real life. But West is one of the all-timers from the standpoint, obviously, what a great player he was, both at the University of West Virginia and then, with the Lakers, but also became a great executive. And even, somewhat late in his executive career, orchestrating the trade for Kobe Bryant that extended the Lakers dynasty, sort of as a franchise, well into the 2000s. That's what Jerry West was. And so this is one of the towering figures in basketball history. The thing I'm always fascinated by are the guys who have gone on to like greatness in two things. For instance, Charles Barkley is a Hall of Fame player and has become a great broadcaster. No one can dispute that. Hard to be great at one thing, virtually impossible to be great at two things, but Barkley, I would say, is an example of that. Jerry West was a all-time great player, especially for his era, all-time great player, and also became a great executive as well. That's very, very hard to be truly great at two different things. There are other examples in sports, just a couple of there. So I did not know that. Sad news today with the passing of Jerry West. Let's see what else. Johnny Prescott says, I'm signing a pledge this morning to never question Kirby again. I wasn't too hot on Coley's return after a season as offensive coordinator, happily eating crow as he keeps bringing in elite talent. Yeah, so can I be like a blowhard for a second? In life, intelligence and competency is always specific. You can be generally incompetent. You can be bad at everything, but no one's good at everything. Intelligence and competency is always specific. I would just said before, in case of someone like Jerry West, happen to be good at two things, but no one's good across the board. You can be bad across the board, but no one's good across the board. Any kind of like proclivity for success is always going to be in sort of a specific category. And so we're seeing that for James Coley. I mean, just to be completely honest, I don't want James Coley as my offensive coordinator. I'm just being honest. And I'm not trying to dig back up the past or rub his face in or anything like that. It's important for me to be honest with all of you. And certainly at the time, we were pretty critical of Coley for how he handled that offense in 2019. But do I want him as my wide receivers coach? You betcha. You betcha. And I feel like we had some intuition this was going to probably work out okay. But my version of this, Johnny, and perhaps you were there with us too on this, we weren't too sure about Stacey Searles around here. We weren't. We didn't know what that was. And that was a time in which, Georgia needed something good though. Georgia was blessed with like what I believe is probably the GOAT of offensive line coaches in Sam Pittman, I guess. And then he kind of got the Arkansas head coaching job. And, I was really happy about the Matt Luke hire when it was made. But at the time that Searles was hired, offensive line was going to be a really important position for Georgia for a lot of reasons. And I wasn't too sure. And all Searles has been is good. He's just been a good recruiter. He's been good on the field. Georgia's offensive line is one of the program's top strengths. And to have your offensive line be one of your top strengths is usually a hallmark of a very successful football team. And so I think what you see is, and you can cite this for examples well outside, Georgia too, is that sometimes and by the way, this may even be true for like Coley when it comes to being an offensive coordinator. Sometimes whether a guy is successful or not in a given position in a given year is dependent on like unseen circumstances that we can't always fully comprehend, that there's a lot that contributes to the perception of, was this successful, was it not? Because if you look at some kind of like, especially in like back when you had these sort of long time career assistants, they'd have some good years, they'd have some not good years. You know, like look at Kevin Steele, for instance. Steele was a guy that, I mean, Auburn fans wanted him to be there, or a handful of Auburn boosters wanted him to be head coach. But if you look at Steele's tenure as defensive coordinator, some years he seemed to be really sharp, and some years he looked like he was really dumb. And, you know, why was one thing one way and one thing the other? Who knows? And so, obviously, the coaches kind of know more of the true story of what's really going on there. And if Kirby Smart hires a guy, even if he's been at Georgia before and his previous tenure wasn't everything fans wanted it to be, as Johnny points out, Kirby probably has a reason for doing what he's doing. Let us see. DT says, just ask my wife. I'm good at everything. Well, there you go, DT. That's funny. That's funny. Let's see. Anything else at DawgNation.com? Let me go to Randy All asked if Ben Cleveland bit the head off the squirrel while it was still alive. No, but that's what Ozzy Osbourne did to a bat. Is that what that was? I mean, can you imagine? It was Ozzy Osbourne that did that, or somebody did that. Bit a bat, is that right? All right, let me go to Facebook. Oh, yeah, Ozzy Osbourne did bite a head off the bat, I've been told. We can't confirm that. All right, let's see what else over here on Facebook for a moment. Jacob O'Neill checking out. Jacob, we're glad you're here. Philip Jordan Wells gives you a Roscoe P. Coltrane, which obviously is boy, that's right there in my right there. It hits me right in the heart. James Best, is that the actor who played Roscoe Coltrane? James Best, great actor. Also did a lot of Twilight Zone episodes, which I used to watch with my grandfather. I still watch Twilight Zone a lot. That's so James Best, the actor that played Roscoe P. Coltrane's from Valdosta, Georgia. Man, we have learned so much today. That's awesome. It's really cool. Really cool. William Camacho says he may migrate to YouTube since I have a tendency to start there first. We try to mix it up. I started on Facebook one day this week. Let us see what else. Let's see what else is going on. Some of the people are saying that Oprah Winfrey's been hospitalized. I don't know what that is, so we'll keep our eye on that. Johnny Prescott also says, if you'll indulge me one more today, I noticed this morning how Jake refers to Kirby as Kirby. Perhaps it's just modern times, but I can't recall any of Coach Dooley's players referring to him as Vince. Imagine a Bama player saying that, on a first-name basis. So a couple of things going on there. And I don't know why this is, but I think that Kirby is one of those names that just sort of rolls off the tongue a little bit. And like I get the idea of the respect for coach, and I know, Deion Sanders made a thing about wanting to be called coach because I can't explain this, but Deion is also sort of a name that just sort of rolls off the tongue. Maybe that's why like the sort of Coach Prime thing kind of got started, whatever. But so I do think that there's a certain sort of casualness that exists now in sports that didn't used to exist. And, certainly in professional sports, players are calling coaches by the first name on a regular basis. I have a suspicion that the thing about calling Kirby is not about, hey, I'm casual with my coach, because Kirby's pretty tough guy to be casual with, just given his intensity. I think this has got to do with his name. In other words, if Kirby's name was, Fortnoy or something like that, then you probably would be calling him Coach Smart more frequently. If his name was, Franklin or one of those names, there's just something about Kirby that just makes you want to call him Kirby. And I think that's probably one of those deals. Let's see. I believe we got something here. Yes. So Tennille mentions about not getting notifications. So here's the deal on this. So this is one of those things as an organization that has been really hard for us because, like, a lot of you who watch the show live kind of know we're always here no matter what. But there are thousands of people who tune in via Facebook that sort of depend on the notification to kind of know that we're live. You know, people live busy lives. Not everybody knows our schedule. And so if they don't get the notification from Zuckerberg, they may just assume we don't have a show. And so this has been an organizational challenge because Facebook is going to do what it's going to do. And Facebook does not really send out notifications anymore. It just doesn't. At one point in time, it did that very consistently. And then one of these days, just for its own reasons, it just stopped. And I mean, I guess I would acknowledge that they have a right to do what they're going to do. But, I'll just be completely honest. Part of the reason we built up DawgNation.com as a place to watch the show is because we were having so many issues with Facebook. Just totally being honest, is that the big tech platforms are just not always very dependable. So creating a platform that we had more control over, if we're going to say, hey, depend on us to show up every single day, then why not encourage people to go to DawgNation.com because we had greater control over that. So just being honest, the growth of DawgNation.com as a platform to watch the show is almost solely because of the fact that Facebook is in many ways the bane of my existence. And actually now there's a different big tech platform that I'm probably frustrated with, but I'll leave that out. That they just don't send out notifications. So, we depend on people to kind of know we're here. And so if you want to kind of help share that message of, hey, if you normally get those Facebook notifications, you probably won't get them, or you might not get them, and they'll never tell you why. I've tried to, I've tried to have conversations with, Facebook people throughout the years, and trust me when I tell you, they're not always very satisfying discussions. But that's the deal, is that when it comes to being really dependent on a big tech platform of them sort of doing what they've kind of previously done in the past, you just can't depend on that. And they probably, won't do that for us here either. But that's why we are so dedicated to always being here, because for those of you that check in on a regular basis, you have some peace of mind of knowing we're here. Frank Patterson says, YouTube dogs are like public school kids. We got to figure stuff out on our own. He says the Facebook dogs are like private school kids, basically, depending on the notification, let them know. Jay Shipe says, are you saying the Facebookers are dumb and need to be told what to do? Very funny. Here's the difference between Facebook and YouTube. And I'll just give it to you. This is totally free. Is that YouTube is a much better video platform. There's no doubt about that. The thing about Facebook is, like, 65% of people over the age of 12 have a Facebook account. It is still a gigantic tech platform. Like, people hear about, all the cool kids are on Instagram or TikTok, things like that. But in sheer numbers, Facebook is still gigantic. So, there are a lot of people who spend a lot of time on Facebook. So, of course, we want to be in front of them because there are a lot of people who spend a lot of time on Facebook. The numbers, even after all these years, bear it out. It's still a gigantic platform. YouTube probably does function better from a video standpoint. But, we want to still be in front of all the Facebook people because of how many people are on Facebook on a regular basis. But they're, as a platform, pretty erratic. Let us see what else. Yeah. Philip Wells pointing out Valdosta, the home of all kinds of celebrities, such as Buck Bellew and Roscoe P. Coltrane. So, yeah, there you go. Very funny stuff. Jonathan Aaron says, is the moon landing today's conspiracy theory? No. I will tell you this, though, is that like the whole idea of like not believing the moon landing, which I was just joking earlier. I promise, I was just joking about that. But that's not new. Like I remember hearing about that when I was a kid, and that's pre-internet, and that's from people who were like that existed like back during the time. That's one of those things that is kind of taken on a new life because of how much fun people have with this sort of stuff. But I remember my aunt talking about that. Like I remember like people basically just, to give you an idea what my family was like. I remember her talking about that. Like the whole idea of thinking that was like a TV studio or whatever the thing that people say is, like that was a thing that existed. Like I wasn't in the 60s, but like I was a child in the 80s, late 80s. And, my older relatives who had been around in, was it 69 when that happened? Yeah, 69. I remember them, they used to talk about that at the time. Oh, by the way, Tennille, who does double duty, she's over there on the YouTube side defending the Facebook folks. All right, we're going to get ready to go here in a minute. Let me go back. I ended up going a little longer than I anticipated. Go back to DawgNation.com for a moment. DT pointing out that, Kirby's father was also a coach, Coach Smart. He said, so call me Kirby. Plus, like, you want to have a memorable name. I mean, when it comes to, like, broadcast stuff, Brandon Adams, not the world's best name. That's why, most people just sort of call me BH. It's a little easier to remember. Like if you've got a cool, easy to remember name, like Kirby sounds like the kind of guy you'd want to be friends with. I promise that works in recruiting. So from that standpoint, I think that's where a lot of that stuff kind of comes from. Randy also mentioning the flat earth thing. Is that Kyrie Irving? Is he the one that believes that? I don't even understand like where they even get that from. And I probably don't want to know, but I mean, you can prove that, right? I mean, you can just circle the globe. Like if you go far enough, you'll just end back where you started. And, like the air travel has to like sort of play the carom as it is, sort of like playing the fade in golf. If you're flying from New York to London, you got to sort of play the curvature of the earth to get there. If you fly completely straight, you'll miss it. I think. Like that seems like a fairly easy one to disprove to me. But maybe there's stuff about that I don't completely understand. All right, we're going to go for now. Y'all have a great day. Find R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. Hot weather is coming, and it's kind of here already, but especially on the way. So get your air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Find them online at rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. All right, y'all have a great, great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. We'll look forward to talking to you then.